Um, Hi everyone, so I'm Marion, I'm Paul's wife. Now, I'm also not a professional speaker, so I'm just going to be reading what I've written. So Paul, I told you tonight that I was going to be honest. So are you nervous about what I might say?
Yes.
Good. Now there's no need to be, but I just wanted to make you squirm. So a few days ago in preparation for speaking tonight, because I couldn't remember, I asked Paul, how long had you been out of prison for when we first met? He said, we met in 2012, which is almost 7 years ago now, and therefore, how long had you been out of prison for, Paul?
About 5-6 years.
So only 6 years. I had thought that it was a lot longer than that. And to be honest, I'm still recovering from the shock of this news. So we both agreed that looking back on this, that's pretty fresh out of prison. So when I first met Paul, I did not know about his past. In it was a few months after he had done his TED Talk, and this was the first time that there had been media surrounding his story. We first met at a mutual friend's house, and although I was interested in Paul, like most men, he was failing to pick up all the signals. So I made the first move, and I asked him out for a coffee the next day. We exchanged numbers and made plans. And then I went home, and as you do with anyone that you're interested in, I decided to Google him. My Google search revealed some headlines that I was not expecting to see. Murderer gets PhD was just one of them that I remember clearly. I thought to myself, I really do know how to pick them. After extensive research, I came to the conclusion that he sounded like a really interesting and amazing person. But I did question whether or not it was someone I should go on a date with. I texted Paul to tell him I had Googled him and that I wanted him to know because otherwise I would feel quite awkward. He said if I didn't want to catch up with him anymore, that was totally fine, but also that he would answer any questions that I had for him. I decided that I was still keen, and that was the best decision I ever made. 7 years, a wedding, a mortgage, 2 beautiful boys, and many adventures later, and we're here tonight. Paul has been talking about publishing a book ever since I've known him. When HarperCollins came to him with an offer, he asked me what I thought, and I said, definitely. What are you waiting for? Just do it. At the time, I did not exactly know what I was encouraging Paul to do, as he had pitched quite a different book to me. I was not expecting a detailed first-hand account of his past, essentially a prison memoir, which I'll admit has been difficult for me to read, particularly since a lot of it was new information for me. I find it challenging at times because had I met Paul back then, I probably would not have liked him. We were living very different lives and our paths never would have crossed. Like literally our paths wouldn't have crossed, he was locked up. Paul was sitting in maximum security prison getting stoned, and I was at Brooklyn Primary School, playing soccer with my friends at lunchtime and practicing my jazz ballet routine after school. Now Dad, since you've read the book, my difficult teenage years don't seem that bad now, do they? So thank you, Paul. You've made me seem like a total angel. Paul today is someone who has achieved so much. He has made incredible positive change in his life, which is so admirable, especially when it would have been easier to continue on the path he was travelling. Of course, there are his impressive academic, sporting and career achievements, and now this. He's a great friend to others. He's the world's best dad to our boys, and he's someone that people love to be around. He's incredibly generous, has such a positive and optimistic outlook on life, which you could say is rather surprising, all things considered. And of course, he's also hilarious. The pinnacle, though, has surely got to be him hitting the jackpot in the wife department. Paul gives back as a patron for Start Taranaki, an organisation that helps at-risk youth, and he visits prisons to talk to inmates to give them hope that if you take responsibility for your actions and are willing to put in the work required, people will accept you back into society. He spreads the message that no matter how damaged you may think you are, or no matter what you have done, you always have the choice to start doing things differently, and that it's not about what happens to you in life that defines you, but it's about how you respond to these situations and challenges that's the most important part. A lot of the content of the book was obviously quite rough, and seeing as it's my husband, it's difficult for me to read it without that being in the front of my mind. So I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily enjoy reading it. But I know that a lot of other people will, and will get a lot out of it. as there are so many important messages throughout which we can all apply to our own lives. In my opinion, it's an eye-opening and powerful read. Paul, I'm so proud of you. You inspire me daily. Congratulations, and I love you.
Nā rangi tere e whewheo mai ne te tātou katoa he tangata no te puku o te rohi o Ngāti Toa Tene no te wahi oku te puna. Inare, ka Aotearoa, tuko kai nā te toro, mauri ori kia tātou. So I said a few things just there, but probably the most important was to actually acknowledge you as leaders within New Zealand society. And when I think of leadership, I don't think of being a manager or something like that in the workplace. I think of being people who aspire to live lives that can make others want to be better and do better themselves. And I think all of us in this room have that aspiration. I think that's why you're here. It's certainly why I'm here. It's certainly why I'm doing what I'm doing. The process of getting ready for this book, the process of doing media around this book has been a challenging one. Most of the book was actually written before I was released from prison. Probably about 90% of it was stuff that had been put together when I was in my final years of prison. And reading back over that stuff has been quite confronting. You know, our capacity to remember ourselves in more favourable ways than is warranted is quite interesting. And of course, I see myself in my previous experience of prison through the lens of who I am now and what I would have thought was appropriate at this point. For example, I have a really clear recollection in one part of the book of me trying to be the voice of reason and trying to convince other people not to retaliate against an attack that happened in maximum security. But actually, when I read the original manuscript, I was one of the people who was fully encouraging the attack. I wasn't someone who was being a voice of reason. And it's been quite confronting for me in that respect. I think one of the things that the people who have supported putting this book together, HarperCollins, myself, John McChrystal as well, who helped really sort of shape a rough prison memoir and manuscript into something more readable. Something I think that we really committed to and that has come through is that we didn't want to cast me in an unrealistically positive light in terms of the reality of my behaviour at that point. And I think that's important because I think that does greater justice to our capacity for change and growth. If I'd presented myself as the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time, that wouldn't have been an honest account of who I was. I was someone who was making choices that had nothing but a negative impact on other people. I was someone who didn't have a path for myself. I was someone who had really limited notions and ideas about who I was supposed to be in the world, who I was supposed to be as a man, what my limitations were. And these were things which really imprisoned me long before I was locked up. And I wanted the book to do justice to that. I wanted the book to do justice to the journey. And there are lots of points along the way where I really would have wanted to insert more of my current views of my behaviour, you know, my current views and my attitudes there, just to make sure people, you know, didn't get the wrong idea. But we tried really hard to resist that. And, you know, no spoiler alert, but it does have a happy ending. So, you know, I do get there in the end, but it does definitely make for some pretty rough reading. You know, I suppose the regrets I have around my own experiences, the hurt that was caused to other people, you know, my family, the family of Boyd, my victim, you know, the people who were negatively impacted by my actions, that's what I regret. I think personally I don't regret any of the experiences I've had, and I think part of that is that I've been fortunate enough to experience what's called post-traumatic growth. You know, all of us have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder before, but what very few of us realise is that actually there's an equal likelihood that if you've gone through extreme trauma, you will come out the other side thinking that you're better off for the experience, that you've actually grown as a person as a result of it. That doesn't mean it was any more pleasant at the time, any less traumatic, but that's a really important idea for us to hold on to, is that we don't need to be permanently damaged by life's challenges, by life's traumas, that they can actually be the catalyst for growth for us. And I truly believe I've experienced that myself. And, you know, I focus on trying to be better as an individual. And I think that's one of the key messages in the book, is that our goal as people, if we really want to strive towards our potential, if we want to be the best versions of ourselves, whatever that means for each of us, and all of our many and varied roles, the goal is not to be good. The goal is to get better. And that's a journey that never stops. And when the goal is to get better, that means our failures, those are just the foundations upon which we can build to really reach success. They're the opportunities to learn and grow and come back stronger. And when it comes to being that best version of ourselves, when it comes to being better, you know, our only measure for success is ourselves. Who was I yesterday and who am I going to be tomorrow? Because no one else has our unique life experiences. No one else has our strengths, our disadvantages, all of the stuff that makes us who we are. But I think we get very caught up in this comparison with others, which is such a false and unhelpful one. So that's one of the messages I hope people get from the book, is this idea of getting better, not being good. The most important roles for me in my life these days are absolutely being a husband and being a father. And I regularly fail to be who I want to be in those roles. I regularly fail to demonstrate the behaviour I'd want my reputation to reflect, to live in line with my values. But I don't see those failures as a judgment against me. I see them as an opportunity to learn and grow and come back stronger. So tomorrow's version of me is just that little bit better for Marianne and for the kids. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be a real journey for me for the rest of my life, because none of us have got it sorted. None of us are sitting at the top of our mountains, you know, being who we want to be in all situations with all people. And it's funny too, listening to Chris and Marianne talk, and particularly about that, being grateful for your experiences. I actually look back on my experiences and I'm incredibly grateful that my life wasn't harder, my life wasn't worse, because it certainly could have been. And there's lots of people who didn't have the same level of support as me. And that's something else that I hope that, you know, people who read the book get from the book, is that we have this narrative that you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, that you make it on your own. But that's not the real story of success. Success is a team effort. And I would not be standing here today if it was not for the opportunities provided to me by many people. There's a number of people in the room who made the decision to take a risk on me. And in doing so, gave me the opportunities to turn my life around. And I think it's something to remember that, you know, not everyone has that support, not everyone has those opportunities. You know, my dad, who's in the room and who will hate being spoken about, he's English, doesn't like being the centre of attention. You know, it's not the way of his generation, but I'll tell you this right now, you know, he visited me every weekend, or nearly every weekend, for over 10 years. I want you to think about how much value you place on your days off, and imagine what it's like to give up one half of one of those days to go and see someone who you truly love and care about in a terrible situation where you know that there's nothing you can do for them, nothing to make their life better or to make them safe. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for his willingness to pay for my study out of his pension, to provide me the support that was required, to just have this quiet, unceasing belief in my ability to do better and to be better, and then to provide the opportunity when I was willing to try and take those steps for myself. You know, I'm really big on personal ownership and accountability, and I think regardless of your situation, there's always things that you can do. But I'll tell you what, when it really comes to, you know, being the best you can be in life and having the best life possible, that is a team effort. And for me, that was a big part of the journey, is recognizing that the ideas I had around what it meant to be a man growing up, that being a man was someone who could stand on their own 2 feet and not need the support of other people, that was a complete opposite of what it really means to be a man. What it really means to be a man for me is having the courage to make yourself vulnerable and ask for the help when you need it, to seek those opportunities, to risk rejection, and to be brave enough to do that. You know, not to stand on your own 2 feet. Now, there's lots of people who support, you know, I had in this room. Again, there was my father, there was John Barlow, who was an unbelievably positive mentor for me. I mentioned that in the book. You know, I distinctly remember the many arguments I would have with John walking around the yard in terms of different philosophical points of view. You know, I remember him talking to me once, for example, about someone who'd just been attacked for double dipping on the phone. So in prison you have a 15-minute limit on the phone, and that's because often you'll have a 60-man unit where there's one telephone, and so everyone needs to be able to have a go. But I'd say the biggest cause of fights within the units often is people taking 2 goes in a row, double dipping. And I remember this person getting attacked as a result of that, and John using that as an opportunity for a moral conversation around what the right response to that would have been after that person got a severe beating. And I remember thinking that that was the appropriate response. because my whole world had been driven by growing up in that prison environment. I was in there from 18 to 29. And prior to that, I inhabited, a peer group in an area where violence was seen as the answer to things. And I remember John asking me, wasn't there a different way to think about this? Couldn't there have been potentially a different response to this? And it was those types of conversations that were incredibly helpful to me in terms of providing a counterpoint to the general prison culture and ideas. Not to mention, John taught me how to say three instead of fui when I was about 27 or something, so that I could speak properly, or properly. I'm not sure if that's a real word either. But not only him, but Sarah Burke as well, Dr. Burke, who's there, who also will not like being pointed out of attention. She is one of the owners and the co-founders of the business that gave me an opportunity for employment when I was released. I'll tell you what, if I hadn't had that opportunity for employment and to develop some skills, I just would have been so limited relative to where I am now. And they took a big risk on me doing that, and I will be eternally grateful to them. Not only that, Sister Mari as well, who's here. She's one of the stars of the book who illegally brought me KFC as per the Auckland Herald excerpt, and other such misdemeanours you can read about. So it's good she's like one of those badass nuns from one of those But if it wasn't for that kind of support, seriously, I would not be here today. I have had so much. And I don't want people to come away with the idea as well reading the book that all of the staff within the prison environment are corrupt or are against you. Again, there were lots of people who bent over backwards to make it possible for me to study and to be here, and who did so on their own merit. Lots of guards, lots of the people in the prison administration who made that possible. And those were the people I depended on because there was no systemic support for it at the time. The original word, the root word for educate means to lead out of. And that's what education did for me. It led me out of the darkness of my own ignorance. And education was the path for me. And it'll be the path for a lot of people. I just wish it was more available for people in the prison system. And it's not the path for everyone. But I just hope that as a society we can push towards creating circumstances within the prison environment where people have the best opportunity to take responsibility for themselves and to change their lives. Not everyone will, but our reoffending rates speak for themselves. In Scandinavia, the reoffending rates within 2 years for people in prison is about 20%. In New Zealand, it's 70%. So we have a comparison. We know that we're just not doing the right things or enough of them here. And I don't know about you, but I don't want people out of prison coming and living near me in my neighbourhood. I don't want them around me with that kind of stat. And that's because I know that we're not preparing people for release. We're preparing people for reoffending, for that revolving door. And I think that's something that as a voting population we need to take responsibility for. Now, I'm not actually as much of a firebrand about this topic as I've just been in the book. Just to let you know, I've actually mentioned more of this now because it's one of the things I found interesting for those who have read the book is how surprised they've been by the reality of prison. Whereas, of course, because that was my life for so long, I didn't realise that it would be such a surprise for people who hadn't been exposed to that, just what that environment's like. If I was going to talk about another message in the book as well, I would say a key thing to keep in mind when it comes to your personal journey or finding your path and trying to be, the best version of you, whatever that means for you, is that it's actually the small steps that take you a long way over time. I think so much of the time we're overwhelmed by the prospect of what we want to achieve and what we think it will involve. But actually for me, my journey from delinquent to doctor, being here now, that was about small daily discipline, small steps I could start taking within the prison environment, and then once I was released. And I'll tell you what, those small steps take you a long way over time. One of the things I mentioned in the book is the quote that we're all familiar with. The quote that we're all familiar with, of course, is Rome wasn't built in a day. But just before the book was finished, my brother Andrew gave me the full quote that I'd never heard before, that I thought so captured the essence of how I see things in this respect. And that is that Rome wasn't built in a day, but bricks were laid every hour. Think about how different that quote is in its meaning. And that's what I would say, and that's what I hope people get from the book, is the idea that they can come back from whatever the situation is. That no matter how bad they think they are as a person or the situation they're in, that there's always a path forward, and it's a path which is taken with small steps. I so appreciate you being here to support me. I can't tell you how much. I've done a bit of media this week and I've got a bit more to come, and it has not always been that supportive. And that is fair enough, because I'm not talking about a book about my journey as an Olympian or as an All Black or something. I'm talking about a really seriously bad past, and it's fair enough, I get a bit of challenge, but I just want to say I so appreciate you being here in support, and this has been such a great environment to be in tonight, so thank you very much.
For your words, and to Chris and Marianne as well, and to HarperCollins, also the publisher. We're going to have books for sale, and Paul will be available to sign at the end of the counter, so form an orderly queue. Thank you for coming. Good night.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Thank you.